I used to wake up every morning with this crushing feeling that I was somehow failing at life despite checking all of the right boxes. But here's what I discovered. The problem wasn't that there was something in me I needed to fix. I needed to stop trying so hard to have my whole life together and start building a life of whole person well-being from the inside out. This is called positive psychology, and it's the science behind why some women thrive in their feminine energy and some stay stuck in their survival mode. Today, I'm so excited to have a new guest on the podcast. Megan McDonough is the founder of Wholebeing Institute and my mother. Through her work in positive psychology, she has helped thousands of women going from feeling stuck to living the life of their dreams. Today, she's gonna share the scientific framework that will help you build confidence and long-lasting happiness. If you're a high-achieving woman who looks like she has everything together on paper, but inside you feel anxious, lost, and alone, this is the episode for you. Hi, Megan. I'm so happy to have you on the channel with me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Emily. It's a delight to be here with you.
Yeah, before we get into the psychology and the science of mindset, what brought you to positive psychology?
And had I thought that I would be here, I don't think I could have imagined actually where I am now. But there was one fundamental question that has been with me for as long as I can remember. And that question is, how do we live well? How do we do this human life well? That's really deeply important to me. And I actually think it's the fundamental question that everybody asks themselves is, how do I make the most of this life? Now, it's funny when we talk about how do we make the most of this life, that question tends to be raised when we feel like life is not going well, when we feel like there's problems and challenges and difficulties. And for me, that pinnacle came about 20 some odd years ago. And I remember I was in a successful job. I remember distinctly thinking to myself, this is killing me. It's a weird thing to be thinking, but really there's a lot of times when we feel like where we are in life is not where we want to be. And it's that time where we begin to ask ourselves, if I'm not happy, how do I move more towards happiness? And for me, decades ago, it came with saying yes to the natural next step, not staying sort of dry and suffocated in a role that felt like I had given what I could and I wasn't growing anymore. So positive psychology was one step among many as I was saying yes to life and moving towards what brought me more happiness. And so I have this weird juxtaposition between the science of positive psychology and the ancient wisdom traditions that you find in yoga and Buddhism and other spiritual traditions. And through those paths, I've woven together some spiritual ways of thinking about happiness combined with evidence-based science of positive psychology. And that's actually how I ended up here today.
That's amazing. I know I always will tell people that I was blessed to have grown up with a mother who's a quasi-therapist. And I spent my whole childhood immersed in the science of positive psychology. And it has helped me deeply in the moments of my life where I have felt hopeless in the future, to reframe and slowly start taking the actions that will over time shift me to feeling more happy and content in life.
There are certainly steps we can take. We do not have to be blown about by the winds of life. Life can be hard and challenging. And so the question becomes for each of us, how do we move towards more happiness?
Okay, so most people think that psychology is about fixing what's wrong, but that approach actually keeps us stuck. But positive psychology seems to flip that completely. Can you tell us how the science of positive psychology came about and how it differs from traditional?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head that human nature, we tend to look at what's wrong. If we were to get a report card and we got 4 A's and 1 B, what would we focus on? Why did I get that B? Why did I get all A's? This is true personally as we look at what's wrong and what we want to fix. And it actually also plays out societally in healthcare, where we diagnose disease, in psychology, when we look at the pathology of what's wrong in our psyche. And so early on, psychology was about trying to fix. humans. How do I fix anxiety? How do I fix depression, schizophrenia? All of those pathologies and diagnoses of what's wrong with you was the history of psychology as a field. Now, there were pockets like in humanistic psychology where they began to look at human flourishing differently. And that actually became codified when Marty Seligman from UPenn became the APA president back in the 90s. And he said, look, as a field, we need to not just fix or focus on the science of what's wrong and how to fix it. We also need to focus on the science, the study of what makes life worth living. What is the good in life, and how do we study that well? And so if you look at the work, it is not just about fixing what's wrong. It's also saying, how do I move towards what's right? Because if you think about it, if you got rid of all disease and pathology and fixed all of your mistakes and all of your problems, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be thriving.
We could be kind of neutral, right?
Could be kind of neutral. Yes.
I'm fine.
Yes, I'm fine. Nothing wrong. Keep going. Just because we get rid of what's wrong doesn't mean we're thriving. The same with our health, right? Our health and well-being. Just because we don't have a disease or cancer or a chronic condition, it doesn't mean physically we're thriving and doing well. So positive psychology came about when Dr. Seligman said, we're going to study the science of human flourishing, not just human pathology. And in that question, that was looking at the growing tip. And if you look at anything, there's always a bell curve of performance, right? And when you look only at the very problem, the very beginning, that doesn't help you thrive. Those people at the growing tip, those who are doing excellent and thriving and flourishing, let's study that, and let's study how anybody can move up sort of that spectrum of well-being towards better.
So in order to help people move up that spectrum of well-being, you've created the SPIRE framework to identify the key areas in their life where they can focus their attention to improve their overall happiness and well-being. Can you share more about that?
Yes. So first of all, the organization Wholebeing Institute is named specifically around the concept of whole being. And that's the idea that whole person makes for the greatest well-being. Like, we just can't take one part of who we are and say, I'm going to fix that, or I'm going to move towards better here, and ignore the rest of our lives. So wholeness is inherent in us. And the model that we came up with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, Dr. Maria Sawar, and myself, is one that honors the wholeness of who we are. And that's through the acronym of SPIRE, S-P-I-R-E. So each of those components of our well-being has two principles. So I'll go through each of them along with the two principles. S is for spiritual. And by spiritual, I don't necessarily mean following a particular religion or God, or for you that might mean that. It really looks at two things. What is meaningful in my life, and can I pay attention? Can I be mindful of this life? So the two principles are, what is meaningful to you, and how can I be mindful of that in my own life? And the second component is P, for physical. Listen, sitting on the couch eating bonbons all day will not serve your well-being. So physical, the two components is like nourishing one's physical body. And we're not just from the body up to our brain, but our brain down to our body. So it's a bi-directional approach. What we think affects our body, and how we move affects our brain. The third component of SPIRE is I, for intellectual. Now, this may mean sitting and reading your favorite book, but it can also mean this sense of curiosity in our life, of being interested in something, of being connected to and interested in nature, art, reading, music, literature, those things that gain your attention and interest. The third component is R, which stands for relational. Listen, the greatest predictor of well-being is how connected you are to others and how others are connected to you. So wellness is not something that is done in isolation. from others. So relationships are very important for relationship with others and the relationship we have with ourselves. Finally, the E component of SPIRE is emotional well-being. It's really consciously building upon cultivating and fostering positive emotions and also acknowledging negative emotions. We're not going to just forget and negate and ignore the reality of negative emotions, but neither are we going to indulge and let them overtake us. So that's the final concept of SPIRE is E, highlighting positive emotions and accepting negative emotions.
The part of the framework that always resonates with me deeply is the relational aspect, because I think a lot of the self-help community online likes to paint the picture that you can do all of your self-care in a bubble and you will feel happier if you're doing all of your workouts, your self-care, your journaling, your reading all by yourself. But if you've isolated yourself in order to have this perfect routine, you've completely neglected a whole component of your well-being, that you need to be a thriving person. And when I think of the happiest moments in my life, they're always when it feels full of friends and family and people whose relationships really light me up from the inside.
Yeah, I think that's something to highlight for your audience, because you're absolutely right that the self-help community puts a burden on the individual that if you're not happy, it must mean
it's your fault.
It's your fault. You're not working hard enough. You're not working out. You didn't sleep. You didn't do your manifestations properly. This whole thing of my own happiness is only mine. While it is true that we have capacity and volition to increase well-being, if we think that it is only us in a bubble doing it, it's completely missing the environment in which we swim in. So those people that are in our lives, the people that we see every day at work, those that we choose to hang out with because they enliven us, all of these things impact not only how we show up, but who we become. So very important to look at your relational network as a pivotal point on the impact it has for your own well-being.
And especially if someone watching my channel so deeply wants to manifest their dream life, they can't do that in a vacuum, because the greatest leverage you have towards growth and new opportunities is actually interacting with someone else who has social proof that the life you want can be yours, and has experience and has resources that can help you along your journey. So you can journal all you want, but it's still just you and only your experiences in that vacuum doing the work.
Yeah. And there's something too about how important it is for you to show up for yourself on the page. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's important to me? But then to test out that against conversations with others. Like, tell me how you feel about that. How does this show up in your life? Do you have any suggestions on how this works? Tell me how you handle this. I saw you use your strength this way. Tell me how that was built in your own life. Very important, especially if we don't have powerful models in our family of origin, right? If we don't have that support in our own family, how do we build that for ourselves? Because these are the ways in which we begin to see possibilities. When we feel like we can show up in a safe way, that allows us to grow and become and be who we already are inside and expressed on the outside.
But if you know in your core you are someone specifically different than what your existing circle believes you to be, it's hard to become that new version of yourself that lives inside.
Yeah. So this is part of the interesting thing about saying, if I recognize that this relational circle impacts me, where else could I go to hang out that maybe gives me a different view and gets to try on something different than who I'm perceived at work, in my house, with the people that already know me? Absolutely.
I love that idea. It sounds like you can take yourself on a little field trip to test out being the new version of yourself.
What I find interesting about this is that when we think of the concept of who we are, we tend to think of it as a monolith. This is me. But in fact, even within the container of this bodysuit, inside we have different versions of who we are. You know, we can have our ought self view thinking, what am I supposed to do? What does society think I should do? What do my parents think I should do?
The person who looks like she's fitting all of the correct parameters of a good girl.
This is our odd self, that part of ourselves that tries to live up to our own and others' expectations. We also have within us our best self, those moments where we come fully alive, where we feel like we're using our strengths. We can have our possible selves, those versions of ourselves in the future, who we want to become. Both, and those versions of ourselves in the future that may scare us. They all live as mental models of who we see ourselves to be. And what happens is when we start taking action, we make a possible future self a probable self because we're taking action in that direction. And that's how it works.
And it's almost as if once you start taking that aligned action, your brain starts to believe that that possible self is more and more likely to be you in the future, because it can feel like this delusional fantasy world when you're just thinking about a future version of you who you would like to grow into one day. But as you slowly start taking the steps, it starts to feel real.
Yes, and you're doing that in the context, not only in your head or in your journal, but out in the 3D world. And when you do that interaction and you get that feedback, I am a confident person, or I am a such and such person. When we act and move out into the world in a certain way, we are basically telling our brain that we are a different version than who we might have perceived ourselves to be behind the closed doors of our eyes in our brain. So yes, this is a very fascinating way of thinking about the cultivation of self.
We are happy to talk about things like this with all of the spiritual language available to us, but a book that really helped me to get a more granular view of this was The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman. And he took a much more secular approach at the topic by using totems to kind of step into a different version of yourself. And he talked about how people like Beyonce will have this alter ego who she calls Sasha Fierce, who she steps into when she's on stage to embody that empowered confidence, and bringing tangible aspects of the person that I want to be to serve as symbols, as a reminder of the person I can be in that moment, have been really helpful for me too.
I love that. I love that idea. And this harkens back to some work by Dr. Ellen Langer in Harvard, who wrote the book Counterclockwise, among others. Basically looking at taking older people, putting them together and listening to music they listened to in their younger generation, or reading newspapers from a younger generation, made them walk differently, made them feel younger. So how we surround ourselves, whether it's with the totems or whether it's with music or whether it's with others, that reminds us of a way we want to be. Maybe we're older and we want to feel younger. Helps us move and be and see possibilities in a different way.
And it completely changes your energy. I will tell my friends and people in my YouTube community all the time that the main thing people notice about you is not actually how you look visually outside that package, but it's how you energetically bring yourself to the world. Is it light? Is it warm? Is it young? Or is it heavy, really sad energy? And if you can kind of shift emotionally the state you're in with easy things like totems, or in the book, I believe he called it the Superman effect, where he put on Clark Kent's glasses and then he felt like Superman after the fact.
Oh, interesting.
And you can use that symbol to change your energy state to feel more like that person. It really helps you create change in your life.
We have a tendency as humans to have a negativity bias, to look at what's wrong and focus down on our attention. And we can also open up the aperture of our attention to notice those things that are going well in our lives. This idea of noticing what's good and being grateful in your life for what is working helps us see more than just one problem after another that we need to fix. Yeah, I just want to sort of hit upon this idea that sometimes it's not all about just changing who we are in a moment and putting on a fake smile or a fake hat or an inauthentic way of feeling. It's really acknowledging the truth of where you are at this very moment, no matter how difficult, no matter how anxious or sad, and recognizing that there is more here than meets the eye, and allowing yourself to open up to what is working, what is good. The sun is shining. I'm breathing. whatever those small things are. So honoring all of that.
I love that. And it's hard because I think negative emotions like anxiety, depression, stress, fear, they kind of close your perception of the world, and it makes it harder to see anything except that which is right in front of you. But if you can take a moment and pause and really allow yourself to see, there's always something a little sparkly, even on your darkest days. And I certainly see that in my own life, but it's a challenging reminder when you're all caught up in your emotional negativity.
Negative emotions, they don't feel good. So we naturally think, how do I get out of this emotion? How do I get away? It's almost like we want to crawl out of our own skin because it feels so uncomfortable.
You're trying to problem solve this horrible thing you're feeling in your body just for some relief. So you'll go find a friend, you'll go to some substance that'll fix things quickly, you'll go run to another country to escape the situation.
Yeah. And so part of the work here is opening the container such that this big emotion, okay to be there, to not have to get rid of it, but to open the container larger than the emotion so that you can notice there is more here. There is space. As big as this emotion is, as hard as it is, there's more here.
It takes work to grow your emotional capacity such that the container can hold space for all of this negativity so you can understand it, understand how you need to move past it into a more up-leveled state of being. Is there anything that people can do to help to grow their capacity to sit with and hold more heavy emotions?
Yeah, so it's interesting that for me, this is where the spiritual component of SPIRE comes into play. And I also think when we ask the question, what can we do about this? There's two sides of that equation. What action and self do I want to move forward? And what can I surrender into and let go of?
This yin yang.
Yes, that's a very good way to say it, because, you know, a lot of what we're doing in positive psychology and in the psychology of well-being is we're playing with our thoughts and we're playing with our sense of identity, and we're asking ourselves things like, what can I be grateful for? What strengths can I bring to the table? How can I hold this emotion? And on the other side of it, of surrendering, so this is a positive selfing on one side, selfing. How do I create a stronger container of self?
A strong self-concept.
Yes. And on the other hand, you have an unselfing. How am I letting go of all of these things? And for me, that's twofold. One is that sense of this container of others, this container of I'm not a separate self, but instead in relationship and can rely on others. And also the sense of whatever you call this bigger meaning. You know, in some circles it's called God, other circles it's called consciousness, in Buddhism it's called emptiness. So whatever phrase or way in which you're working in this container, it asks the question, how can I let go of this self that I work so hard at building so that I can simply rest in awareness of my own being? So those two juxtapositions are interesting because there are times we should take forward motion, working on our mindset, our perspective, our gratefulness, our strengths, our resilience. And then there's times where we can just let that go and open up to something larger than who we see ourselves to be. And by the way, I don't see that as a language, cognitive understanding. That's a falling back into intuitive sense of who am I? Who am I?
I feel that will resonate with so many people in the audience because we all know we hold these two energies within us, that yin and yang, that masculine, that feminine energy, that doing and the being energy. And for those of us who have our whole life tried to be that hyper overachiever who wanted the good grades, who wanted to get the perfect score on her exam and have all the cute clothes and look right at every event and speak correctly at every single event, you may end up feeling extremely burned out, anxious, and stressed. And I've also had to kind of relearn how to train myself to rest more in my body and just be and allow myself to experience life instead of being hyper focused on what I have to do in the next moment, because that's where I found happiness, and that's where I found hope and peace. I've gotten a lot of achievement and accomplishment out of that doing focused action, but I really felt happy when I allowed myself to play more in life and to see what's right in front of me, to be in this very present moment, to be here in the now. And it took me a long time to understand the play between those in my own body, because it's not that I'm a high value feminine woman, it's that I am a human being with both of these energies which can be engaged in any moment which serves me best. And as I've gone through your work when I was younger, I think I was much more resistant to the spiritual teachings. But they're the biggest unlock for me that has helped me to step more into my being energy, to understand my intuition, because it has this innate trust in some greater power of the universe that the rest of the life will work itself out if I just do my thing, if I just enjoy my life and do what I can do today and enjoy this present moment that God has given to me. And it takes off this immense burden from your shoulders. Because when you're doing everything, trying to problem solve every minute of your future and doing your 5-year plan, you pretend like you know better than God or your spiritual deity what the future holds and that you can predict everything. And I put on myself a lot of stress. I wish my younger self had learned more about how to surrender all of those possible futures and to just be, and I think she would have been a lot less stressed in the process of going through life.
And there is nothing wrong with the achievement. We know, for example, in positive psychology, that those people who have meaningful goals and take action towards those meaningful goals are happier. And it's not because they reach a goal, it's because the daily steps towards doing meaningful work is in and of itself rewarding. The problem is if we think that goal is going to give us everlasting happiness, we are mistaken, because the goal is always moving. And so sometimes in life we get this sense, will this ever end? Will I ever get there? Will I ever just be happy? And so we're chasing this without the realization that thankfully it's always a moving target. Because I don't think actually, even though I joke about this at some point, I don't think we'd actually stay happy if we were just drinking pina coladas by poolside. We would get bored with that. So there is no there.
Miserable in their retirement because they've lost that sense of purpose that makes the game of life feel fun. If you decide the game's over, this kind of means you decided to expire on us. That's not a very happy end of the story.
And so what's funny is that this funny discernment between moving in a positive direction, taking action, having self-efficacy to move an important thing forward, and a letting go and a surrendering. This is really interesting because there's no right answer. There's only the given moment of saying, should I push or should I open up? I think of this as a leadership approach, and I have a quadrant of leadership. I have a 2x2 model of leadership. On the one hand, what is the self-leadership of how I'm understanding the emotions and the internal psyche of living within this human body? When am I triggered? What's mine to own? Where do my vulnerabilities come into play? And also, how do I use my personal power? What are the ways in which I show up and using that personal power in a value-based way? On the other side, it's that relational, what am I letting go of and opening up to others? And how do I let life lead me versus feeling like I'm always leading life? So it's this sort of interplay between self and unself that is a daily moment-by-moment discernment. I like to call it the natural next step. What is the natural next step for you?
And I think you're very good at discerning your intuition, what is needed in that moment. But people who are just coming to the energy work, I think they believe them to be separate things, where the yin and the yang and the masculine and feminine are actually integrated parts of a whole. And like the whole is you, who you choose to show up in throughout the course of your day, but you still need to choose whether you're going to be in that doing mode or that being mode.
or the decision is made for you. Sometimes it just unfolds and you don't have to be cognitive in your head all the time thinking, what should I do in this moment? No, we breathe in and we breathe out. That's just what happens. Sometimes we go left, sometimes we go right. So yes, and for those struggling with anxiety or depression or difficulties, the question becomes first experiencing what it means to be human. It's not easy. It's not easy being human, right? It has ups and downs, ins and outs, heights of elevation and depths of exhaustion. So this first experience of what's happening now in my life, what can I be aware of? And that's why I think the mindfulness is actually the first key of understanding what's happening now. What can I be aware of? And then opening that awareness aperture to even more through the positive emotions, through the relationship development, through the intellectual curiosity that you may be feeling. And in that exploration, that sandbox, allowing yourself to experiment little by little, just little steps of what I notice that makes me happier than I was a moment ago. How would you not notice that if you weren't paying attention to what makes you happy? Dr. Dan Tomasulo from Columbia, he wrote a wonderful book on hopefulness, because many times in life we can feel hopeless in that tight, constricting, let me get out of my own body sensation. It's a very difficult place to be in. And so hope is interesting in that it's the only positive emotion that needs a negative emotion to exist. Like, why would you need hope if everything was going great and life was all unicorns and rainbows? You wouldn't need to be hopeful. Hope only shows up when things aren't working the way you want them to work. So cultivating hope in your life can start with something like a 3-1-3. 3 kind acts today, 1 small step towards a meaningful goal, no matter how tiny it is. And at the end of the day, counting 3 blessings of something good that happened during the day. So that's how hope can be cultivated no matter what situation you happen to find yourself in.
Yeah, it's a constant practice too to learn how to strengthen your muscle to still feel hope when things feel dark. Okay, so a lot of people who are in their late 20s and 30s, maybe in the job that they chose, but maybe not completely satisfied in that career. How can positive psychology help people to find meaning and purpose in their life if they feel stuck or in a rut right now?
It's so interesting when we talk about the field of positive psychology, focusing on what's right, what's strong versus what's wrong. When we're in a career that we're not really crazy about, one of the things we'll want to do is identify what's right in our own strengths that may be completely invisible to us. So if I looked at my own life, for example, a couple of decades ago when I was in a job that I really, it's not that I didn't like it. It's a good job, working with good people, doing good things, but I found myself being very dry, desiccated, unenthused about it, not motivated.
Can you tell the audience what you did before?
So I have a degree in nuclear medicine, which is a type of diagnostic imaging. And, I was working at a major radiopharmaceutical firm. I was in national accounts working with some of the big clients on negotiating contracts for them. It was a good job, good field, but I felt like I was at the stagnant, I guess is the word that I would say. And it's because my strengths weren't being used. So there is in positive psychology, many people call the backbone of positive psychology are the VIA character strengths. They're a list of 20 odd strengths, the virtues that every human being has. And our signature strengths are those character strengths that are a unique constellation for us that when we use them, we feel enlivened. And it's interesting, and your audience can go onto the VIA Character site. And
there's a free assessment online. It's pretty fun to take. I like doing all those online quizzes to learn more about myself.
Yes. And the VIA Character strengths, they're just a wonderful way of identifying what strengths make me feel alive when I use them. And I guarantee if you're not feeling your job is where you want to be, it's because those strengths aren't being utilized. So for me, when I took that assessment, really some of my top character strengths involved things like zest and bravery. If I not doing something out on the edge, I get really bored. The edge is a good place for me to hang out. You know this.
I've lived with her my whole life. The edge moves all the time.
Yes.
Guys. She stresses everyone out because the edge keeps moving to a new funtivity side.
Yay, a new funtivity. Yeah. And so you might find that for yourself when you did it. What do you realize are some of your strengths that you want to be using? When you use them, you feel enlivened.
I found it specifically fascinating because I always felt really out of place in engineering. I felt really misunderstood. Like the things that I thought brought value to the team were not necessarily those which they considered valuable. And when I was thinking about jobs, I'm pretty certain I wanted to be a Disney princess at first.
Disney princess.
And then at 4-ish, Daddy probably had the heart to tell me that that wasn't a real job, or maybe I should be a fashion designer. Yeah. And we thought that was going to be my career for a while. And I ended up choosing my career very pragmatically because I wanted a stability in my life. And I didn't spend time thinking about what am I good at? What would I enjoy the process of doing? And what would make me feel like I was bringing my authentic self to work and being rewarded for my intrinsic strengths? So none of that was part of the career choosing process. I walked into my guidance counselor's office. I noticed that my school was ranked #2 for return on investment in your education. And I decided that was a good decision. And I ended up going to school for engineering because I figured it was something I could do. It was a stable job. And I got a few years in and I felt that there was just this emptiness in me. And I would look at other engineers who clearly loved what they were doing, and I wouldn't understand them. I would think they were a little crazy, thinking, you really think this is fun? Like, I thought I was missing something. I was very confused.
Oh, that something was wrong with you.
Yeah, it's like there's something wrong with me because I don't get why it's just not fun or enjoyable or coming as easily. And I took the exam, not the quiz online, and all of these strengths came back that were so resonant of the person I show up on as the internet. All of this is appreciation for wisdom and beauty and public speaking and teaching and helping others that I don't fulfill in my role as an engineer at all. And I'm blessed that I now have this outlet to use my strengths because it's fueling immense amounts of happiness for me. Because it felt like, as you said, there was a part of myself that was dying at work. This true version of me who wished to come out into the world couldn't exist in that environment of an engineering field. She has to be somewhere else where she feels safe showing her full self, to being that fluffy, girly person online who's excited to help others, who's excited to guide them towards a brighter future, who's excited to give them things like hope and optimism and help them problem solve the challenges of their life. And it's really fascinating when you get quizzes like that resonate with something in your soul. There's another one called 16 Personalities that will also give you a similar career breakdown. And even that one said I should be a lawyer advocating for others, or I should be a therapist, or I should be some kind of person who's a spiritual leader, like a wisdom giver of other people. And it's so important if you're trying to make big career shifts that you think about what you can sustain for a long period of time. And your happiness is a key ingredient in surviving through the hard parts of work. Because if you don't like it, you're going to be the first one gone from a project if things get challenging. And the people who really succeed in their career love the doing of the thing and the process, not just the outcome. That outcome, like you said before, isn't what's going to make you happy. It's that journey, that process of unfolding and discovery that is so important to love in itself.
Yes, and I would encourage those who are listening who may not have the job that they absolutely adore is to think about what strengths need to be utilized either after work, before work, within your work environment, because otherwise life does feel dry. We know that our strengths enliven us, and not being able to use those strengths exhausts us.
And sometimes if we've lived in those strengths, they don't even feel like strengths to us.
You're absolutely right. They can be invisible. Yeah. Or, I have people take the VIA character strengths and they will sort of dismiss their strengths at the top. Those don't really mean anything. And they'll look at the very bottom and they'll say, I wish I had more of that at the very bottom of the list. So this idea that our innate strengths may be invisible to us, or we may discount as unimportant and not realize how key they are and how natural they become to us.
But it's not necessarily something that comes natural to others.
That's correct.
I always tell people to think about what others ask them for advice on. And that's a good indicator too of what your strengths may be.
And this is where if we were circling back to the relational part of well-being, imagine a workplace, a family relationship, a community relationship, a partnership relationship, where we recognize the strengths of each other and we named it and we help people see. I see you're using the strength of love of learning as you're studying this, or the questions that people may bring up at work may show the character strength of prudence. We need to listen to all of those different voices in the room, acknowledge each individual strength, and step into our own as we do so.
And people can bring a lot of value to the table if they have a strength that is outside of your wheelhouse. If you're an extremely brave person who thrives on the edge, and I may be someone who's much more prudent and like
we make a great team. We make a great team.
Yes, yeah. you make a good working team because you fill in each other's not holes, but you like fit nice together with the puzzle piece.
Agreed.
Now let's address the elephant in the room that is destroying women's mental health. Let's talk about social media. My viewers and me are seeing their friends getting married, having babies, traveling, getting fun new plastic surgery, and having their dream life all from their bedroom on their smartphone. And when they're experiencing that FOMO, it can feel like they're failing in the moment if they've not yet achieved some of the things that feel like social markers to them in their life. So how can positive psychology help people step out of that comparison trap?
When you look at the pretty person, or you look at the perfect vacation, or you see the top of the mountain, there's a whole lot of not so perfect that is not being seen. And so we look at these social media and say, oh, I wish I was more like that. Or this person has it all together. Or, I like to go hiking and I hike up a mountain and I feel hot and sweaty and cranky and
hungry.
What do you see on social media when you look at other hiking? It's the pretty picture at the top of the mountain. When you look at the perfect vacation, on social media, you don't see the missed plane, the late travel, the food that you couldn't, like all of the human problems. So what we see is a completely edited version of perfection that doesn't really exist. Now, that doesn't mean we can't learn, we can't connect, we can't see others, we can't get good value. Like, I hope that we're giving good value in this podcast that's helping listeners move towards better. But listen, I did do my hair today. I am all dressed up.
We are in a studio. There are two other guys helping us with sound and lighting. Yes. I have an editor at home who will deal with the footage after the fact. I will spend hours making a thumbnail and figuring out what title this is going to already spent an entire day thinking about the script for this.
I love your authenticity and your honesty. This gets to the truth of what we see as a facade of social media. So if your whole life is looking at the social media, spending hours scrolling towards what you see as perfection, what you just pointed out, that whole triage of information that happens before, during, and after, we can remind ourselves that whatever we're saying, they're real human beings behind the screen. And you think you're missing something that may not really actually exist, and that you as a human, you're really wonderful. And I actually want to look in the camera and say, you are amazing. And part of this work that Emily and I are doing is just to keep pointing you back to you, for you to be able to see that wholeness and that beauty. And so the social media thing, put down your phone, go out for a walk. Positive psychology, that's if you look at SPIRE, spiritual, meaningful, and mindfulness, how much time am I spending on social media? Is who I am following a representation of how I want to show up in the world? Physically, how much am I sitting looking at social media? Intellectually, what interests me? How can I use social media to acquire and build my curiosity? Relationally, can I do the social media thing like you and I are doing it now? I find this a lot more enlivening than over Zoom.
So fun.
It's so enlivening to me.
My friend Ashley was a wonderful area to connect with her with.
Yes. So this is a relational work, emotionally noticing if you're scrolling through social media and you find yourself getting more and more depressed, or if you're using social media as a brain numbing, let me forget about my problems, brainless activity.
Or even a boredom clutch. I think that's where it gets me the most. I feel a little bored and my brain's been instinctively taught to go for my phone whenever I want to get out of that slightly uncomfortable emotion and scroll for a little bit.
It is addictive. You get a little hit of dopamine, you just keep scrolling. So there's a physiological need, there's a wiring of the brain that needs it, and then there's the mindset of all of these perfect people out there that I'm not.
It's tough. There's two things that really help me kind of detach from the perfectionism I see online. One is creating more than I consume. So I spend a disgusting amount of time on social media. It is an extremely intellectual process for me. It's a really creative process for me. It's a relationship building process for me, whether it's with my editor, with you, with another guest, or someone in the marketing group that also helps me with stuff. It's all of this lovely project for me. It's not always just a way that I'm vomiting my energy into a trash can and kind of sucking the fun out of life. And then the second thing is actually something from one of my favorite internet gurus, Mina Irfan. She's always saying, my life is where the fun is. I am the fun, and the rest of it comes to me. And on realizing that I'm feeling sad or depressed or FOMO whenever my consciousness is looking at someone else instead of looking at what's here in the now, that's when I feel really low and really down. And I think social media encourages things like depression and anxiety because it constantly takes your awareness away from yourself onto the other, into the comparison trap, but also out of the now, which is something that Eckhart Tolle talks about as being extremely hurtful for your mental well-being. And if you want to experience happiness, you have to be here in the present moment.
I love that. Well, how you described your use of social media was really a SPIRE whole-being approach. Interested in it. It's relational. It makes me feel good. It's a creative act versus let me mindfully scroll through comparisons that don't help me land in the authenticity of who I am. So it's a good reframe. I like it a lot.
So you talked before a little bit about how spirituality is a really important practice in the SPIRE model. What do you think is the role of kind of new agey spirituality? People like Neville Goddard, people like Joe Dispenza, people like Eckhart Tolle. How can they help people, and are they as useful as more traditional wisdom speakers?
Interesting question. So the path I've chosen to take as a teacher is to lean heavily on the evidence-based science when I teach techniques. That combined with the ancient wisdom traditions, which I think can really inform how we live into the happiness at our core. So I've chosen myself to look at peer-reviewed research, to look at randomized controlled studies, to look at the literature. And that's what I tend to teach. So Eckhart Tolle, I've listened to him, love his work. There isn't a lot of evidence-based work on that. Doesn't mean it can't help you. It just means I don't necessarily teach his work in
your coaching
Wholebeing Institute. That's correct. Do I read his work? Do I listen to him? Yes, I do.
Yeah, big fan.
Big fan. His work does touch upon mindfulness in a huge way. That's really the core of his teaching of how we use our attention and how we fall back into awareness. And that falls under the S of SPIRE, of mindfulness. And there happens to be quite a bit of evidence-based work on mindfulness. And of course, Joe Dispenza is doing a whole lot of studies on the neurophysiology, on when he uses these manifestation techniques. It's just not something I teach and don't know a lot about it. Do I listen to his work? Yes, I do. I don't teach it. But it really harkens back to the question of this idea that there's nothing wrong with experimenting with spiritual paths that resonate and call to you. So if it's Joe Dispenza, if it's Eckhart Tolle, those are part of the expression of what's resonant for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts into a bigger container this who am I really question, which is really the basis of all of it, this identification of who we see ourselves to be and how can I expand beyond that. Is that helpful? Or is there something else you would point to in there?
Because I believe from a cognitive perspective, you could arrive at a pretty similar state of hope and optimism for the future and believing in yourself through a more traditional Catholicism version of God and feeling taken care of and loved by that traditional religious practice, and also by following some of the teachings by Neville Goddard, Eckhart Tolle, Joe Dispenza. I think all of that is teaching you similar things, but they have different channels to do so. So if any of those are helping you to feel more connected, to be more in the now, to connect more with this sense in the world that there's something greater and more magical out there than just you in this mundane life, I think that all cultivates a sense of hope within people.
Yeah, well said. And I know someone for me early on, Byron Katie, another spiritual teacher. Mm-hmm. She's been very meaningful in her work to me. So within Wholebeing Institute, we tend to teach the science of positive psychology, neuroscience, behavior change, while leaving room for those other spiritual traditions because they can fall into the category of what's meaningful to you. And no one can dictate what's going to resonate for you versus your own self of being aware of that. So yes, follow the yes thread in your own life of that natural next step, which for some people might be Byron Katie, some people might be positive psychology, other people Eckhart Tolle, the Bible, the Torah, those things that allow you to settle into something larger than the identity, the small identity you have for yourself. For me, it's been, my own spiritual practice. I've been practicing Kashmir Shaivism for 30 years now. That's a yoga tradition. Advaita Vedanta is also one that speaks to me, and Dzogchen Buddhism. So all three of those fall under the non-dual traditions of practice. Your beingness is large enough to hold all of those in a way that works towards your own well-being.
And what I hear from you is that it's just really important that you find in your life which resonates for you best, instead of just assuming, oh, this works for that one person, so I should follow the same thing.
Well, even gratitude, which is probably one of the highest researched positive emotions in positive psychology, and one of the go-to interventions, what are you grateful for today, will work better for some than others. Because when you look at evidence-based science, even that's on a bell curve. Doesn't work the same way for everybody. So in the literature denotes the number of people in a study. N of 1 is the most important, and that N of 1 is yourself. So there may be 100,000 people in a study that says gratitude works. You try it and you find that it doesn't work. I think most people would find that gratitude works to some degree. But again, there's nuances. So this N of 1, what type of gratitude practice works for you? How do you elevate what's good in your life? That's the experiment for yourself in your life. Because the question of how do I live this human life well, ultimately is yours to answer.
And you have to have the courage to look inward and trust your own physical experience of that as well, which for me has been harder because I think I tend to look for external validation a lot to validate my own experience. Where
tell me, is this true? This thing
right?
I'm feeling.
Is this right? No, it's right. You felt it. It's there. Therefore, it's your experience. I did really want to get your opinion on things like affirmations and subliminals because it's something that comes up in the community so much as a cure-all to their negative emotions. And they, to me, always feel just like sprinkles on a cake. Tell yourself you're beautiful, you're happy, you're fulfilled, you're wonderful, you have glossy hair. But when your 3D reality doesn't reflect that, it can be very hard to believe all of these things you're telling yourself on the surface. So I was wondering if you could share for our listeners what they can do to make things like affirmations a more powerful practice, or if there's something deeper that would be even more effective for them to be doing.
Yeah, so interesting. You know, when you say an affirmation, is your body having an allergic reaction?
Are you affirming it?
Do you know what I'm saying? You could say I'm a confident person, but you feel so shy and so introverted that your body literally breaks out in hives. You feel that, right? That dissonance. So if you're wanting to become a more confident person, what would it look like to do small acts of confidence building activities? How maybe you say hi to a stranger, and that what starts happening is when you just say the affirmation, but your body has an allergic reaction, you don't do anything differently, there's no circular loop. But if you are curious about this thing called confidence, when do I ever show any bit of confidence, and you recognize it, and then you amplify it, and then you take action on it, you begin to say, oh, I am a confident person.
Because I'm sure there are areas in your life where you are very competent and very confident.
Exactly.
But that may not be work. It may not be when you're public speaking, but maybe when you're at home baking with your family, you feel so alive and confident, and you have this beautiful spread, and you're the best hostess ever. Then you're feeling confident in that moment. And if you step more into that and can bring that energy into other spheres of your life, I think it could help you as well.
So this awareness of when confidence exists already, even if it's in a different form or in a different place, recognizing it, that it's there, then amplifying it through additional actions in other places, you're really doing something more powerful than just naming it in your brain and looking at yourself in the mirror saying, I am a confident person.
The mirror ones help a little more for me than just writing them, but it's still a struggle to get.
So there is a felt sense of confidence that one begins to know. There is a feeling of confidence that's different than the conceptual understanding of confidence. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you might have a definition of confidence in your head, but the lived experience of feeling and recognizing, oh, this is what confidence feels like. So Amy Cuddy did some work. You may see her TED Talk. It's got a gazillion views, millions of views, on power poses, where how we hold ourselves actually makes us feel differently internally. So when we take up space, when we open our arms, when we stand up tall, in these power poses that take up space, they give us a little different feeling of than if we were to curl inward and down and drop our head. So how we hold ourselves does give different cues and internal feelings to our brain. Looking ourselves in the mirror and going down saying, I'm a confident person. You know, we take what we want and we open up the space towards it. We act as if. And that dissonance between our body is a really interesting thing to watch too, because we can say what we want, but if we feel like we're lying to ourselves, it's better to acknowledge, oh, I'm not quite there yet. I've noticed confidence in this place and in this place, and I'm building it over here.
So what I hear you describing is a difference between intellectual knowing and embodied being. So when you're talking about how to be confident in front of the mirror and trying to tell yourself all of these things, they sometimes don't resonate with your body because your nervous system hasn't caught up to the thought that you've had. And all of these small little actions, you saying that it will help someone's nervous system catch up to the thought that they want to believe?
Yes, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that sometimes your thoughts tend to berate and whip and beat your body into thinking it should be different than it is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we really do. Our thoughts abuse our body at times, I guess is the way I would say
Mine do. I'm hard on myself. I beat myself up for mistakes, for things I should have done differently. And it makes you your worst enemy. Like, you have to live with yourself your whole life. If you cannot be your own best friend, you are going to be immensely lonely. And I wish I could have told my younger self to just be kinder to myself on this journey. And if no one's going to stick up for me, it has to be me first, because I would be lost without that.
Yeah, and so instead of using affirmations as a way of forcing the body into something, use affirmations in a way that is expressed throughout the body, in a way that is aligned versus self-flagellation. I'm thinking of Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion, the acknowledgement that this is difficult. You know, when we say affirmations, because we feel like where we're at is in a difficult place. So acknowledging the difficulty, that it's part of being human to have these difficulties, and we're not alone in that. There's no one in the perfect social media world or any other place where they don't have the difficulties of being human. The Buddha, one of his noble truths was that life is suffering. It's hard being human. So yes, I would say affirmations, when used as a way of building alignment and moving into your strengths and building capacity, are valid. If we're using it to self-flagellate and noticing what we don't have and having allergic reaction to it, we can use our body to influence our thoughts, not just our thoughts to influence our body.
So let's talk about love, because one of the things that people most want to manifest in their life is love and romance and magic. Is there anything in positive psychology that can help us to cultivate that romantic atmosphere where love is more possible?
When we speak about love, I feel compelled to talk about Barbara Fredrickson's work, who literally wrote the book on love called Love 2.0. She's a positive psychology researcher at the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina. When she speaks about love, she uses the term love as micro moments of connection. Not that unspecific, romantic partner that answers all of our dreams. No, she's talking about love as being micro moments of connection, of positivity resonance between two people. So what she's talking about in this area is a way of opening up in every relationship, as long as it feels safe. Like you're not going to open up to a thief who's trying to steal your pocketbook, right? This may be at the supermarket. This may be at the post office. This may be sitting here next to you. And we cultivate this positivity resonance by leaning in, smiling, making eye contact, really seeing the other person. And when two people do that, it's called their vagus nerve, which impacts their physiology in the relaxation response arises. There's a synchrony between heart rates and patterns of the body. So those people, you ever meet those people where you just feel, oh, we're so connected. Oh, we click. It is this idea of positivity resonance. This is how she defines Love 2.0. And why do I start with that definition? I start with that definition because it's so inclusive to whoever is showing up in our environment. If we are only looking for that one special person, for that one significant other, it's very easy to say, not you, not you, not you, not you. And we miss the depth of connection with the people that we're with. And this too is that negativity bias. So when we're looking for love, opening up to each relationship as an opportunity for positivity resonance allows you to be in this moment and not feeling like you're missing out on life, because right here, right now are relationships that you can have that with. The other thing I would point to is when we're in relationships is to actively notice two things. One, how are my own strengths enlivened in this relationship or not? And how is the strengths of the other person that I'm with being enlivened? Am I noticing and strength spotting that other person that I'm with? Am I noticing only what's wrong with him or her? Or am I seeing their strengths and what's good? So that's sort of the way I would think about it. How are we opening ourselves to not just the one special person, but love in general, to noticing others' strengths and to notice what we're grateful for in that.
And it has helped me to find so much more happiness in my general life and my dating life, to open my perception of awareness of love from a romantic love directed at one specific person to anyone in my field. And being open and receptive and happy and kind and warm to everyone in my environment has helped me to make friends at the local coffee shop, to meet people at the elevator, to go for a walk and know all the neighborhood puppies. And it just makes life feel so much more special and connected when you, again, open yourself to the possibility of hoping that that little bit of magic can be there. And it's not only on a romantic picnic with candles and wine.
Although we love that.
We do love that.
When we're in a relationship and someone is not behaving well, that's theirs to own and not ours to own. And we can make decisions on our own well-being. And that may mean stepping away from that relationship. So not by any sense of the imagination am I saying that positive psychology is a magic bullet. It is not. And it's not about always taking onto yourself if you're just more open. No, there are people who are misbehaving, not safe to be around, and mistreat others. So those are things that we can firmly stand in our own core and say, no, that's not okay.
And that bad behavior may not just be criminal bad behavior.
No.
It could be just acting in such a way that's extremely detrimental to your mental health. And it's not that they're a bad person. They just may be a very bad fit for you, and the relationship dynamic would cause you immense grief to be in. And it may be such that you both have different inner work to do before you could be in a relationship, or you're just not a good fit together by himself. So when we talk about bad actors, it's not like anything scary is happening.
Right.
I just could be stressed about someone sending paragraph messages and not be able to sleep. And
It's a no for now.
It's
a no for now.
Feel complete. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, though. Okay, I'm sure all of the viewers are excited to know what your personal well-being habits are for positive psychology in your daily life.
Woohoo! I love to talk about it. So it's very varied day to day, but I do have some scheduled fun. So for my own well-being, I play pickleball Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I do 2 hours of formal practice of meditation with a group on Tuesday nights. Most mornings begin with meditation. And throughout the day, I sprinkle in family, friends, and meaningful work.
Sounds like a good mix.
It's a good life. I'm pretty happy with life.
You are, I think, one of the most joyous and playful people I've ever known.
Woohoo!
No, really. I always joke that people online will be all excited to talk about how to get into your feminine energy and be more playful and have more fun in life. And I just want them to be like, just see mom on a day off. She acts like a third grader living her best life. It's like, today is play day. Every day is play day. And it's so magnetic and it's so infectious, and it just makes everyone around you feel so much happier and lighter. And we're all very grateful for it.
Oh, that's fun to hear.
For sure.
Well, so one of my top character strengths is zest.
And that's that fun.
That zesty fun. Yeah, don't take away my zest, people.
No, we need playtime. We need scheduled playtime. She said scheduled playtime.
Yes, you got it.
And I did just want to highlight for people that positive psychology is not toxic positivity. It is the science-based research to help you live a life filled with whole person well-being. And building well-being is not a destination, it's a continuous practice, and the science shows that it works. And you don't have to have your life perfectly together in order to start thriving. Your confidence can grow and your life can change dramatically with tiny changes from positive psychology. Now, before we wrap up, do you have any additional tools that could help people who want to learn more about your work?
Sure, and I'll give you the link for you to put in with the description. But basically, we have some free resources for people who want to start building the habit of aiming towards well-being, more happiness. So I'll leave those with you to put into the comment section so people can get those free resources.
Great. I hope you guys found this super helpful. If you'd like to learn more about this and how to engineer your dream life, you can look at this video here.